So we're live now.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can see that.
Um, Hi guys. Faith, Benga, it's good to have you guys on. How's your day been?
very well, thank you.
Yeah, day has been eventful, so
Interesting, interesting.
yeah.
We'll be looking at. First of all, let me welcome all our viewers to Without a Box. It's going to be a 30 minutes analysis on global affairs and a few local issues. Today we'll be looking at the crisis in Lebanon. We'll also be talking about the success of the economic reforms in Egypt. And of course, we'll be extracting the CBN's current forex policy and the multiple taxes that in form of stamp duties and all of that we seem to be inundating business people with in Nigeria. So I'm hoping we're going to have a very interesting conversation around this. I'd like us to start with the crisis in Lebanon. I'm just getting news that the prime minister has just resigned from his office owing to pressure from Paris, and he's resigned his office essentially. So if you look at the crisis in Lebanon, it's quite funny because you can draw a parallel with what is happening in Nigeria. Um, there's high unemployment rate, inflation is incredibly high, poverty is climbing, and it looks like the country is set up, to essentially favor a tiny political elite in the country. And so the political elite have a way of taking care of themselves while the entire country ravaged in poverty. And so in October last year, protests broke out in the streets of Beirut after the government had fiddled with increasing taxes on the citizens. And the protests went on and went on for weeks that forced the resignation of the then prime minister. And here we are again after the bomb blast 4 or 5 days ago. It's also led to a series of other protests from citizens. I'd like to start with you, Benga. What is your take about what is happening in Beirut? Do you think that what they need are serious political and economic reforms to get people off the streets? Or you think they're in a position where they need global actors like Paris and, of course, the European Union to step in to solve the problems that they have?
You can't talk about Lebanon, about the current crisis in Lebanon without looking at the historical background to it. Lebanon is like, they fought a civil war in the late 70s to the early 80s. It's a highly fractionalized society, and this crisis has been brewing for a couple of years now. There was relative peace, but it's what people analysts will term graveyard peace. So the it's been as a result of years of corruption. The current crisis is as a result of years of corruption by the ruling elite, and like you rightly mentioned, the people of Lebanon seem to have lost faith in the government of today. So this is just, this was just like they would say, the camel that broke the straw that broke the camel's back, the explosion in the port of Beirut. And last year also saw there's been different sorts of corruption allegations against the ruling elite, even before it was a coronavirus pandemic that slowed down the protests. There's been daily protests against the government of Lebanon, calling for the resignation of the prime minister and his cabinet, and so much. And we'll just wait to see how things develop. But it's not a pretty situation in Lebanon. The IMF World Bank has said they would double their help and offer to the people of Lebanon, but I don't know how much of a difference that will make, because as we speak, quite a number of people are homeless and the financial crises are still there.
Interesting. I mean, I like the fact that you gave a historical context to it, because essentially what happened after the Civil War was that I mean they rejigged the power sharing formula, such that power is now shared between the Christian led political party with the Sunni group and of course the Shia group. So what you essentially have in Lebanon is that the presidency is always held by the Maronite Christian. The head of the parliament is always controlled by the leader of the Shia group. And of course, the prime minister is always the leader of the Sunni group. Now, we always talk about an effective sharing formula in most countries that go through the same thing that Lebanon is going through, to essentially force stability in the system and they can begin to make progress. So I'm curious, Faith, if there has been some sort of balance of power between the Christians, the Shia, and of course the Sunni Muslims, how come we don't seem to be making a lot of progress in Beirut when it looks like we seem to have solved the political problem at the end of the day? Or is it a case where the politicians have always been fighting for their pockets and not really about the people? And hence you have a situation that though they have the politics sorted for themselves, the people are still wallowing in poverty.
I mean, that's exactly it. You can say that, yes, they seem to have maintained or found a balance to power sharing, but it hasn't reflected, because I mean, you drew a sort of reference to Nigeria with what is happening in Lebanon. At the end of the day, it is about the political elites, just thinking about themselves, and not. It is not about the power sharing per se. It is mostly just about the corruption that has plagued that country for a very, very long time. Because look at what is happening. Even this prime minister that just resigned from with his cabinet, he was just putting last year, after all of the protests that went on about economic reforms, and none of that happened. So even though they've perfected a power sharing formula, they have not perfected economic reforms. They have not perfected looking out for the citizens of the country. So at the end of the day, he was putting there and nothing happened. Now the people are saying, we don't even care about your power sharing. We just want all of you gone. We don't want anybody that has been in this power block to still remain. If that is going to happen, we don't know, because now the prime minister is in a critical position. It might still be same old, because it was also selected from the ruling elite. So the major problem is not the power sharing. It is the corruption that has plagued them, and the fact that the leaders, they're doing okay. So they're not focused on economic reforms, on changing how things have been done. It's still the same thing. So it's not a power sharing issue. It is just the corruption. Benga, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to jump in here, I did appreciate you mentioning that regardless of the power sharing formula, and to bring things back home, regardless of the power sharing formula, regardless of how they surgically try to recognize every minority and religious sect, the politicians are still united in self-interest. But the difference between Lebanon and the case in Nigeria, which I mean, we still have the same issues of, that's why there's a lot of infections among political parties. There's only personal interest. No one is thinking about people. Is at least in Lebanon, they're very vocal about it. They're on the streets. They've been protesting for months. We don't see that kind of protest here. So I'm wondering if this might actually be the catalyst for the Lebanese political class to say, okay, let's try a new lease of life. These guys have been through so much with this explosion. And I'm talking about Nigeria. I really don't know what will change, but that's a different discussion entirely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just before we run along to the next story, Emmanuel Macron is pushing for certain political and economic reforms in Beirut before they can get help, some assistance from France and European Union. Do you think that Beirut can have some semblance of hope should they get a few billions of dollars in bailout from the French? Will that lead to some sort of economic reform? Or, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, will the pressure from France in terms of dangling a few billions of dollars lead to some sort of economic reform in Beirut that will lead to economic prosperity of the average Lebanese over the next couple of years? Or it's just the same old, the old colonial masters dangling their whipping stick, and nothing's going to change at the end of the day?
I would say this. I know that the European Union and some other world organizations, I think the UN, they've already put aside money. They raised money over the weekend that is supposed to go directly to the Lebanese people in aid. Remember that the Lebanese people kept saying, don't give our government money because they would use it for themselves. I mean, that has to be the height of embarrassment for people to come out to tell. They were actually telling Macron, don't give them money, so that is going to be towards humanitarian aid. Now, the one that has conditions is, if you want to rebuild Beirut, we're not giving you money until you do so. I am not holding my breath, because what a lot, I mean, you are drawing, Benga, you're drawing reference to Nigeria and everything. What they do is, there's a face value or superficial change that they like, okay, let's make it look like we're doing this, so we can access this. And I think the world, they know all those tricks. I don't think they're going to get anything. I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
And let's understand that this is happening at a time where Lebanon is about to default on its foreign debt for the first time in history. Its reserves are critically dangerous and low. And I like the fact that the French, I mean, it's quite a shame that an independent country would have to look to a foreign power to beg for aid, and with conditions attached to it. So the French aren't even getting carried away that, this is a tragedy. We shouldn't be attaching conditionalities before we help.
Yeah.
But because of the track record of grand theft and corruption amongst the political class and elite in Lebanon, they're not. I mean, even the explosion itself, if you look deeper in the story, it's as a result of negligence and corruption. So there's corruption in every facet of life in Lebanon, and the people absolutely deserve a better lease of life. So I like the fact that the French, I mean, no government is Father Christmas at the end of the day, that they are attaching conditionalities to this aid. Let's hope this is a wake-up call, and the people of Lebanon do deserve better.
Taking it off from economic reforms, let's get into a story that came in from Cairo today. Talking about the fact that inflation has dropped to about 4.5%. That's a remarkable achievement, because if you look at the time where, I think it was in 2017 or 2018, where Egypt decided to pursue a couple of economic reforms, of course, pressure from the IMF, who were supposed to give them some bailout funds to pursue those reforms. And what they did essentially was to, one, float the naira, float their currency.
The Egyptian pound.
Float their currency. The next thing they did was to remove fuel subsidies, and of course pursued a lot of other economic reforms that are suddenly, over the last 3 years, led to lower unemployment rates, create a whole lot more opportunities for people in Egypt. It is create thousands of jobs. And of course, we've seen that the prices of food and other items have also dropped significantly over time. So it seems like the economic reforms in Cairo has paid off tremendously. And it takes me back to when those economic reforms were being enacted in Egypt. A few economists in Nigeria had urged the federal government to also pursue those kinds of economic reforms. In particular was the fact that we needed to float our currency. we needed to take away fuel subsidy, and we needed to diversify our economy. 3 years down the line, that has not happened. In our own case, unemployment is going up, poverty is going up, inflation is going up. What in the world are we supposed to do to get our government to the point? Oh, first of all, I think I'd like to ask, are we able to pursue the kind of reforms that Egyptians have pursued in 3 years? Can we do that?
Really,
what are the impediments?
even you that you asked the question, you know the answer. But I'll let Faith go first. I can see, yeah, I can see the answer written all over your face.
I mean,
So,
Bingo. Go ahead, Bingo.
So,
go ahead.
Egypt is totally different, and I'm sure no one is going to. I mean, they're not a democracy. Fatah al-Sisi has been there for quite some years, and is not. It doesn't look like he's going to leave. He sees himself as a modern-day pharaoh. Egypt is working on ambitious plans of moving the capital from Cairo to a new economic and administrative capital. Quite an ambitious project, and because Egypt is not a democracy, he doesn't have to, pander to. It doesn't have so many political interests to appease. It doesn't have a parliament. It doesn't need to play those games. So it can be a benevolent dictator. And that's why they've had that discipline. But in Nigeria, it's a different ballgame. We remember the SAP experiment. Not everyone that listens to World Bank or IMF or those Bretton Woods institutions always come out for the better. This is quite an interesting case because even with the coronavirus, they've been able to maintain Fitch ratings of a B+, which was boosted by recovery in tourism and strong remittances. And that's where overseas remittances, that's where Egypt gets a lot of its forex from. But it takes sacrifice on the part of the people and exceptional discipline for the government to follow through reforms. In Nigeria's case, the people, why they say subsidy is the only thing we enjoy, low fuel prices from the government, and you want to take that away because Western financial institutions say do A, B, C, and then you get this. It won't work because the people have a trust deficit between them and the government. Why does the ordinary Nigerian have to make the sacrifices all the time? They should cut down. They will tell the government to look for other ways, not take off subsidy. And I mean, it could lead to something else. So I don't think that they will be very careful about it. Floating the Naira, I mean, economists will tell you that this is the textbook thing to do. And then you make the sacrifices now, the rewards will come later. Look at the prices of things dropping in Egypt, transportation, food. Have you ever seen anything? When it rains in Nigeria, transporters, it's an automatic inflation. Nigeria defies all economic laws. So you don't want to take everything the IMF and World Bank take to you. Hook, line, and sinker.
Benga says Nigeria defies all economic laws. Okay, I would say this though. The subsidy on fuel has already gone. They've taken it out. And how did they do that? They didn't have a choice, because by the time fuel price, crude oil prices dropped to like $20 a barrel, $20-something a barrel, there was no need for subsidy anymore. The landing cost just showed that it would just be thievery to say you were paying subsidy because you were not paying a dime. So of course you had, the petroleum industry, they came out to say that subsidy is now being taken. NNPC came out and said that they're now taking off the subsidy, right? Which is why you have the price of fuel going up. Now PPRA, they announced 145 to 148, there's that range. Is it now being totally determined by market forces? Is another question entirely, because you have marketers saying that. Well, okay, hold on. Let me just finish this line of thought. That if it was totally determined by market forces, the PPRA would not have to give a price range, even though we know that Their job is to be a regulatory body, and that is to guard against a cabal, which we know the marketers can be. The problem that has for me is this. I'll get back to Egypt later, but I just want to quickly address this. The problem that has for me is this. When we had landing costs, when we had crude drop to about $20 a barrel, calculation of landing cost and everything else and all the levies and all that was about maybe 100 and something. It wasn't even up to 120, but you still had, I think it was even less than 100. Yes, it was actually less than 100, and by the time they brought it down, it was 118. And then, so it wasn't commiserate with what happened in the market, right? Now, just a little $40 to a barrel, you're now like, oh, it has gone up again. Let's take it to 130 something. And now you say, oh, it's 148. So the transparency is not there, but they're not paying subsidy anymore, right? Because there's no subsidy to be paid. By the time you calculate everything, there's no subsidy to be paid. So they're not paying subsidy. If you're talking about devaluing the currency and all that, it's not just one thing, which is where the discipline you talked about, Kate, comes in. It's not just about, devaluing the naira and just leaving everything else to go. Ease of doing business. I mean, every day there is one issue or the other. There is one levy. There's one tax. There are like,
it's not a friendly business.
Blockades, just to make sure you don't do it right, because every time they say, oh, you cannot do this right, like 10 other things are there to make sure you don't do it right. So if you devalue your currency, you have to be able to also, although CBN is saying now that they have adjusted and they're carrying out a unification process, but they have not really done anything. I had a CBN person, calling, I think I told Aya about it, and I was asking, have you devalued? What we are doing right now is that you just go to CBN website and you see, oh, 360. And then later you go and then you see 385. There is no formal statement. There's nothing for you to know that this is what the CBN has done. Now, when Egypt undertook this, devaluing their currency, of course, IMF, World Bank, when they undertook it in 2016, I remember that conversation very much on Twitter, and that was where economics came up. People say like, oh, yeah, the economics with the R. And, they were saying, let's devalue. I said, how can we devalue? We are not Egypt. The issue with that was this. At first, I think it was 2017, their inflation went up to, was it 19 or something percent? By 2018, it was 23%. And then, no, 2017 was 23, 2018 was 20. Last year, it came down to about 19, and now they're at 4.5. It takes time, but you also have to follow other policies. You can't just devalue and wait. Import substitution is important. So if all the things you are doing is spending money on importing stuff that you can locally get, we don't seem to want to do that. We're not ready for it, right? We import everything from corn to toothpick, right? So if you spend all your money, all your forex on that, and then your ease of doing business is also not good enough for foreign investors to stay with their FDIs, what is going to happen is that if you devalue, you are going to be shooting yourself in the foot. So you're going to have inflation rate go up to like maybe how many percent? And then that's it. Because Egypt devalued by 48%. That's what they did. But like Benga pointed out, at least he doesn't have to call, he doesn't have to have tete-a-tete with people like, okay, you know what, let's all come together and do this. He can just decide that's what he wants to do. We don't have that. So at the end of the day, I don't know if we can succeed. Yeah, go ahead.
I think what I hear clearly is the fact that we're not being deliberate about the pursuit of these policies. First of all, you talked about the fact that even the CBN is not clear of what it's doing. It's not publicly engaging people that this is the exact policy it wants to pursue. The PPPRA, on the one hand, claims that it's allowing market forces to determine the prices of the commodity, but then you're always fluctuating with the price at the end of the day. So it's, what are you doing? It's either you're letting the markets decide, and you as a regulator, you take your hands off, or you own it with your chest that you're meddling with the prices in the market. So I think this lack of clarity is also a problem for us. It's also a problem, for the international community bringing their dollars into Nigeria, stifling investment at the end of the day. Of course, this should lead us to the last part of the conversation, which is about the policies that we seem to be pursuing. I mean, we're still in the pandemic, so we're not out of the woods yet. It looks to me like while countries, Germany, what it did was reduce its VAT from 7.5 to 5%, reduce the other VAT from, I think, from 19 to about 16%. Other countries have suspended the payments of mortgages. Some other countries have deferred commercial bank loans. Essentially, what countries are doing is to pursue policies that reduces the pressure on their citizens and giving them a leeway until sometime in the year, towards the end of the year, when they have stability in the economy before they can start encouraging the collection of taxes. But it looks like the inverse is what is happening here. There seems to be a drive from the FIRS to just collect more and collect more and to collect more, from stamp duties here to whatever duties there. And it looks like there is really no understanding of the business environment in Nigeria. We want to tax people to death, even during a difficult period such as a global pandemic. I don't know what you've been learning from your sources. Are we really pursuing a policy that is helping businesses to thrive, or the government has run out of ideas such that the only thing it can do is to just grab monies from people who are already suffering to balance their budgets?
So I don't know what they discussed at the National Executive Council. I do know that there's a new man at the helms of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Mr. Fowler, his tenure wasn't renewed, so he's out. And he did break some records. I don't know why this current gentleman that is there thinks he needs to break Mr. Fowler's record in his first year in office. And I don't know if he lives on an alternative universe, because the entire world is in the midst of a global pandemic. Like you rightly said in your preamble, every country in the world, most countries with great leadership, are working towards ameliorating the effects of this pandemic on businesses, because they know small businesses and businesses are the backbone of the economy. So they don't want them to die. Even the United States is giving billions and billions in stimulus, just to keep them, because this would go away at some point. The humans that will run the economy need to be alive. The businesses need to thrive, so that when things open up, they can pick up and you don't have an economic collapse. It's not like governments are that generous, but they are very sensitive to the reality on ground. However, in Nigeria, it's the complete opposite. And look at the stunts NIPO's try to pull. The last we heard was that the communications minister said he knew nothing about it. But for government to be so irresponsible to even think about those things, young people save up money. They're not even demanding for much. They just want a nice environment for business to thrive in, so that their enterprise and businesses can. But government seems to it's one tax today, another regulator, which shouldn't be the case. It's quite unfortunate. Yeah.
I mean, I was reading a report today where the FIRS boss, Mohammed Nami, said that Nigerians need to pay their taxes, because running the economy in this COVID period, it has not been oil. It has been taxes that has been, pushing the economy. So we need to pay our taxes more. And I started to wonder, like Benga is asking if it's in an alternate universe. The detachment, the insensitivity, it is on steroids, because this is not the time to ask people to pay taxes. Countries all over the world, the thing is this, Nigeria, we cannot afford to give a lot of palliatives, but you can pause things, right? You can pause taxes. A lot of companies are asking for tax holidays, right? So you're looking at, especially companies in aviation, in hospitality, they're not making any money. But somehow you think this is the best time to generate taxes. It is mind-boggling, the detachments, that stays with political or public officers in Nigeria. You are saying that, oh, pay your taxes because that's how we run the country. Now, here's this. He said he keeps the country afloat. Keeps the country afloat for whom? He said the last allocation was taxes. 70% was taxes. So it keeps the country afloat. The fact, the money you allocate, what does it go to? Recurrent expenditure, servicing of debt. So who are you keeping the country afloat for? Yourself or Nigerians? Because what is the benefit to the average Nigerian when they pay their taxes? Nothing.
Exactly.
Nothing. Instead, you come up with different ways to extort money from Nigerians.
I mean, look at the
I mean, it is
NDDC. I would work hard. Sorry to interrupt. Look at what's happening in the NDDC. Our hard-earned taxes goes into subsidizing a lifestyle of, you know, of debauchery for these guys and the members of the political class. And it's really, really unfair.
It is unfair because, like I said, what does the money go to? You can't. And now, I mean, another thing when you're saying that taxes have been the ones has been the ones sustaining the country, it almost looks like he's saying that. Well, I mean, we want to keep up our lifestyle, so you know what, pay more so we can do it. Because, like I said, it's not doing anything for me. I don't know if it's doing anything for you. I can't see where the taxes are going. But then again, it didn't also give us a breakdown of where the taxes came from. Did it come from oil companies? Did it come from telco companies? Can we see the breakdown? What's the private sector? How much taxes are you getting? Because most of these people are out of jobs. Do you understand? So where are you getting the taxes from? The taxes that you're talking about, where did it come from? And why are you so hell-bent on Nigerians paying taxes at this time? Now, you have the federal government saying they have a package, a 2.3 trillion package after COVID recovery fund, right, that they're trying to put there for MSMEs and all of that. So you are trying to give with one hand and take with the other hand. It doesn't make any sense. I don't get it.
You know, and where do you know the businesses? You don't even need to be an economist or a genius. This person hasn't worked in months. Businesses are struggling to stay alive. So many businesses have tanked, and you're talking about taxes. From where? I mean, it's not about tax evasion. Where is it? It's just common sense.
Yeah. You know, the famous Arabian thinker, Ibn Khaldun, I think it was in 1318, made the argument that when empires are initially built, the government or the kings usually collect lower taxes from the citizens. And what happens essentially is that the commerce and the trade thrives so much that it creates a lot of middle class rich people in the society, and there's a lot of prosperity in the government. And over time, the government or the king becomes a lot more draconian and starts to raise the taxes and the tax burden on citizens over time. And what happens essentially is that people lose the motivation to work harder and they begin to pay less taxes. And that eventually leads to the collapse of the caliphate at the end of the day. And that's exactly where Laffer got his Laffer curve theory, which became the backbone of the Reagan economic years, where they encouraged the American business class to pay lower taxes so that the economy can thrive at the end of the day. So I think it's essentially common sense, like you rightfully said, Benga, that if people have not worked in quite a while, if people have not, invested in their businesses in quite a while, why are you essentially overtaxing these people to draw away from income that they do not have? It doesn't make sense at all. And unfortunately, we seem to have a knack for doing things that do not make sense in Nigeria, with our faces bold and our chest high. So I think we're running out of time, and I'd like just to ask you guys before we go, what other stories are you looking at? What have you been following for the week ahead, and what would you be paying close attention to the next couple of days before we meet again on Friday night?
I mean, it's the biggest, it's literally the world's, it's not the oldest democracy, it's not the largest democracy, but they look at the United States of America like a beacon of democracy and freedom. And there's talks around, mail-in votes, and the Democrats are raising a lot of issues because the personnel at the United States Postal Service have been changed, and when you're And the Democrats have called it election meddling because it's a few months to elections. You don't want to be tampering, and a lot of people would depend on mailing votes. So monitoring that, and of course the personality of the United States President Donald Trump. I'm sure he's going to say he was just joking later. He asked for his face to be carved on Mount Rushmore. I thought that was very hilarious. So that's it for me.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, back home here, there's a story that I've been very fascinated and interested in. I definitely will be following it up more. And that is the integrating of the radicalized Boko Haram insurgents into the society, right? The entire rationale behind these people that are still killing, and you're saying, oh, let's bring them back to join the society. That's a story that I'm following very closely. There was a report by the Borno elders, today talking about it and saying that you don't start to integrate people when the war is still on. You wait when it is done or close to done, then you do that because the pain is still fresh. So it just goes to also show that the Nigerian government is very desensitized to the people. If you're doing that right now, people are still dying, and that's what you're doing. So that's a story I'm definitely following up.
I think you guys have brought two very interesting stories that'll be worth following on Fridays. So I'll be looking forward to it and learning from your research work on that. So fascinating conversation.
What story are you following, Ayo?
I am particularly interested in what is happening in Mali. I think there are heads of governments who are visiting Mali this week, who will be pressing for peace talks and trying to ensure that the government does not collapse. I'm also looking at Bobby Wine and his election in Uganda. He's been making a lot of he's been raising his voice in the past couple of weeks, threat to life, abuse of political opposition. I think I find those quite interesting. So I think that's what I'll be looking at come Friday.
I mean, we can also look at this. Let's talk about what's happening with TikTok. I mean, from Microsoft to Twitter, all vying to buy TikTok. I don't understand the app. I don't use it, but I do find the story fascinating. So
yeah. We look forward to an interesting discussion on Friday.
All right then. Cheers, guys. Fantastic.
It was nice to see you guys. Take care.
Well, really nice. Okay then. Bye-bye.